Right now, somewhere in the world, a man is sitting beside a woman, having what feels like a normal conversation. She asks him something simple, something that sounds harmless and casual. He responds without thinking much about it, maybe even gives a quick answer and moves on. To him, it was just another question, nothing special, nothing worth pausing for. But what he doesn't realize is that in that moment, she revealed something important. She wasn't just asking a question, she was opening a door. She was offering a small glimpse into how she feels, wrapped in words that didn't seem significant on the surface. And without knowing it, he missed the opportunity completely. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't recognize what was really happening. This happens more often than most men think. These moments pass by quietly, unnoticed, leaving confusion behind later on. But once you understand what to look for, those same moments begin to stand out clearly, and everything starts to make more sense. There's a truth here that can feel uncomfortable at first, but it explains a lot once you accept it. When it comes to intimacy, women rarely communicate in a direct, obvious way. It's not because they're trying to be confusing, but because the way they express interest is often subtle and layered. Instead of stating exactly what they want, they tend to hint, suggest, or frame it in a way that feels safe. Most men expect something clear and unmistakable. They look for direct signals, something they can easily recognize without needing to think too deeply about it. But that's not how it usually shows up. The signs are often quiet, almost invisible if you're not paying attention. They don't stand out, they blend into normal conversation. That's why so many opportunities are missed. A man responds to the literal meaning of what she says, while the real message sits just beneath the surface. Once you understand this pattern, you start hearing things differently, and conversations begin to reveal more than they seem to. What makes this even more important is how common this pattern really is. Research in communication has shown that women tend to rely on indirect ways of expressing themselves far more often when the topic involves vulnerability or something emotionally personal. Instead of stating things outright, they soften the message, reshape it, and present it in a way that feels less risky. This isn't random behavior. It's a natural response to the fear of being misunderstood or rejected. When something matters to her, especially something tied to closeness or intimacy, she is far less likely to say it in a direct, obvious way. Instead, she communicates it through questions, tone, and subtle shifts in conversation. On the surface, it can sound ordinary, even forgettable, but underneath, there is meaning that goes much deeper. If you only listen to the literal words, you miss that deeper layer completely. But once you start paying attention to the intent behind what she says, those same conversations begin to feel entirely different, almost like a hidden message is finally becoming clear. Now here is where things start to change. Instead of overwhelming you with a long list of vague signals or general advice, the focus becomes much more specific. There are certain patterns that repeat themselves, certain moments that show up again and again in different situations. And once you recognize them, it becomes almost impossible to miss what is happening. This is not about trying to read every gesture or overanalyze every word she says. It is about understanding a few key moments that carry far more meaning than they appear to. When you learn to recognize those moments, you begin to see connections that were invisible before. Conversations you once thought were simple suddenly reveal a deeper layer you didn't notice at the time. You may even start thinking back to past interactions, realizing there were signals you completely overlooked. Things that didn't make sense before begin to come together in a new way. And from that point on, you stop guessing. You start understanding. Before those moments become clear, there is something important you need to understand first. It has to do with why a woman chooses to communicate this way instead of simply saying what she wants. The answer is not random. It is shaped by years of social conditioning and subtle expectations that begin very early in life. From a young age, many women learn that being too direct can be judged in a negative way. They are encouraged to be warm but not obvious, interested but not forward, expressive but still controlled. Over time, this creates a pattern where desire and vulnerability are communicated carefully rather than openly. It becomes a habit, something that feels natural because it has been reinforced again and again. So instead of taking a risk by being direct, she chooses a safer approach. She asks a question, makes a small comment, or shifts the conversation in a way that gives her room to step back if needed. Once you understand this, you stop expecting direct signals and start paying attention to the subtle ones that actually matter. This is where understanding communication styles becomes important. Many women tend to communicate in a way that is designed to build connection rather than simply exchange information. Instead of focusing only on facts or direct statements, they use conversation to test emotional comfort, to see how you respond, and to understand whether it feels safe to go deeper. When she asks you something, it is often not just about the surface meaning of the question. It is about how you respond, the tone you use, and whether your answer shows awareness and presence. She is paying attention to whether you are engaged, whether you are open, and whether you are able to meet her on an emotional level. This is why some interactions feel smooth, while others feel disconnected, even when the words are similar. It is not just what is being said, it is what is being felt behind it. Once you begin to recognize this, you start to respond differently. You listen more closely, not just to the words, but to the intention behind them, and that changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. Because of this, a simple question is rarely just a simple question. It becomes a quiet way of testing the connection between you. She is not only curious about your answer, she is observing how you respond, how present you are, and whether you treat the moment as something meaningful or just pass it by. When she asks something that seems small or casual, there is often a deeper purpose behind it. She is checking if you are paying attention, if you are emotionally available, and if you are willing to meet her at a slightly deeper level. Your response becomes more important than the question itself. It shows her whether you are someone she can open up to, or someone who will keep things at a surface level. If you dismiss the moment or give a quick, shallow answer, it signals disinterest or distance, even if that was not your intention. But when you slow down and respond with awareness, you create a different feeling. You show that you understand there is more happening beneath the surface, and that awareness builds a stronger connection naturally. This is also why many men feel confused when a woman suddenly becomes distant without any clear reason. From his point of view, everything seemed fine. The conversation was flowing, she was engaged, and nothing felt wrong. But from her perspective, something important was missed. She reached out in a subtle way, and the response she received did not match what she was hoping for. In that moment, she does not react dramatically or point it out directly. Instead, she processes it internally. She begins to adjust her expectations, becoming a little more reserved, a little less open. It is not an immediate change, but a gradual shift that builds over time. And because it happens quietly, it often goes unnoticed until the connection feels noticeably weaker. What makes this difficult is that the moment that caused the shift seemed insignificant at the time. But in reality, it was a small opportunity to deepen the connection that was missed. Once you become aware of this, you start to recognize how important those small moments really are. Once you start to see these moments for what they really are, everything begins to connect in a different way. You realize that what seems small on the surface can carry much more weight underneath. A simple question becomes a chance to build closeness or quietly create distance, depending on how you respond. And over time, those small responses add up, shaping the direction of the entire connection. This is where awareness makes the biggest difference. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin to pause and consider what she might actually be reaching for in that moment. You become more present, more attentive, and more intentional with how you engage. That shift alone can change how she experiences being around you. It is not about overthinking or trying to analyze everything. It is about being tuned in. When you are tuned in, you naturally respond in a way that feels more connected, more genuine, and more aligned with what she is expressing beneath the surface. And that is what strengthens the bond, without forcing anything. As you become more aware of these subtle moments, your entire perspective on interaction begins to shift. You stop seeing conversations as just exchanges of words and start recognizing them as opportunities for connection. What once felt ordinary begins to carry more meaning, and you become more intentional in how you respond without forcing anything. You start to realize that connection is built in real time, through small decisions and small responses. The way you answer, the attention you give, and the presence you bring all contribute to how she feels in that moment. And those feelings are what determine whether she opens up further or slowly pulls back. This doesn't require you to change who you are. It simply requires you to be more present and more aware. When you listen with intention and respond with sincerity, you naturally create an environment where she feels comfortable expressing more of herself. Over time, this becomes effortless. You're no longer guessing or second guessing. You're simply engaging in a way that allows the connection to grow naturally, without pressure or confusion. As everything comes together, the most important shift is how you choose to show up in those moments. You no longer treat her words as something to respond to quickly and move past. Instead, you begin to see them as openings, small invitations to step closer and build something more meaningful. That awareness changes the way you listen, the way you respond, and the way the interaction unfolds. You stop rushing through conversations and start being present within them. You notice the tone, the timing, the intention behind what she says. And because of that, your responses feel more grounded, more genuine, and more connected. That kind of presence is rare, and it creates a space where she feels comfortable letting her guard down. The next time she asks something that sounds simple, don't dismiss it. Pause, stay engaged, and respond with intention. That one moment could be the difference between a connection that fades and one that grows stronger. If this gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.